Hello. There, that. I think we're running now. Bring the music down. There we go. Hello, everybody. Hat's falling on my face. I swear I'm not trying to look like Tim Pool. I swear. I don't even really watch him. I just don't want to. I'm not a Tim Pool. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. My name is John. This is my channel, Your Renaissance Man. Oh my gosh. What is today? March 26th, Thursday. First of all, thank you for stopping by. Hope you enjoy this. This is a newer channel. We just started. I'm attempting to make this channel active again. I kind of gave up on it for a while. I have other YouTubes, but this one I've got wanting to do more news type stuff. And so today I want to talk about some Minnesota gun law stuff that's going on. And the last video I did better than my other videos. So, and there's been some significant news in Minnesota. So I thought I would do another update. But before I get into all that, I want to thank all our subscribers. Thank you very much. If you haven't subscribed yet and you're willing to do so, it'd be greatly appreciated. If you've already subscribed, if you could continue to support us by either like, commenting, or sharing. So now that we got the channel business done. Oh, also I do live streams. I haven't really figured out an exact time, but I'm looking at weekday mornings, no weekends. So keep your eyes open for that if you're looking for live content. They tend to go an hour to 2 hours, depending on if I have a guest or not and all that happy, fun stuff. So, Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus. They are not, I only mention them because they are the people that make the biggest difference in Minnesota for helping us maintain our gun rights and protect them. I'm not sponsored by them. I'm not affiliated with them. I am just sharing their names so to help you folks find a place to go to support. I support them before anybody else related to Minnesota gun groups because I know that they're the ones who are actively pursuing lawsuits and they're the ones that are actually in the courtrooms. There are other Minnesota groups that do a lot of screaming and shouting on the internet, and I don't know that they do anything else, and they're happy to collect money for it. So if you're willing to support anybody beyond just a thumbs up and you want to help somebody fight the fight, I highly suggest going to Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus. So, what I wanted to talk about is yesterday, I had a few developments. Let's see what the first one was I got written down here. HF 3401. And, I am not a lawyer. So this is the take of the simple everyday gun owner, my take on it. You can always look these up for more detail. All you have to do is Google Minnesota and then put the bill number. And this one is HF 3401, and you can read it in depth. My understanding, this bill is mostly to uh, word an existing law, and it is about allowing guns in public schools. And the way it sits right now, and when you say public schools, we're talking about K through 12. And the way it sits right now is there are no firearms allowed in schools unless you have permission from, I don't remember who the authority is, if it's the principal or the, superintendent of the school district, but it's spelled out in there who has the authority to grant that. But it does give the school district the option to decide if anybody should have a firearm in that school. Um, what this bill does is it rewords it to basically that no school be allowed to have firearms in it no matter what. And, basically saying that the state knows better and you don't get to decide. Why do I think that's important for you guys to know about? Because this would not allow for security of any type that's armed. So, for example, if whatever school district XYZ wanted to have armed security because, whatever reason, I don't know, student or parents are begging for it. We feel safer if blah, blah, blah. Superintendent, principal, whoever feels like, okay, enough people have verbalized their concerns for the safety of their children. I'm willing to bring on an armed security guard. Now, it's up to them to decide who, but for simple terms, let's just say an off-duty police officer. So we feel reasonably comfortable with that person being armed because that's something they already do. So let's just say they hire an off-duty police officer from their area or sheriff or something like that to do security at their school and armed. This bill, or this, if this was allowed to pass to reword the law, it would take that away from the schools. And the reason I don't like this is because it's blanket coverage. So it doesn't take into anything outside reasons why, if there's something going on in some area of the city, state, whatever, where there's elevated threats, to that school or whatever, the school could not just implement this on their own because it'd be illegal. So I mean it becomes very black and white that that's no longer the choice of the school to bring on armed security. And that's why I don't agree with it, because a lot of this security issues are dealt with politically around the state, meaning whatever political party is carrying the bigger stick gets to decide, or is the ruling majority type thing. And there's some reasons to argue why that's okay, because if that's who people voted in, then that's why they feel that way. But it doesn't give them any opportunity, And the main reason for doing this is because school shootings is a real threat these days. It does happen. It even happens in our state of Minnesota, unfortunately. And we've had a few recently, which are just terrible. And no doubt in my mind, if they had armed security, they could have been stopped. They could have been stopped before anybody else in those schools was hurt. And, the media tends to side with the Democrats, and they have this agenda to disarm us. And, they just speak about it as guns bad. And that's the way the media projects it also. And so they're trying to lead us to believe that all guns are bad versus if we defended ourselves, we wouldn't even have to worry about a threat. So if the school for some reason decided to have their own officer there, these threats could have been stopped. It's not always 100%, but somebody there doing that job is much more likely to stop it than some passerby or nobody there other than the teachers. And then it gets into, you want to train teachers to defend your students? I'm not against that either. That's not a bad idea. But this would take all that away. It wouldn't even be possible. So it'd be nice to leave that option, because if things escalate somewhere, some reason, why should our schools be a soft target? Because that's basically what it turns it into. If you're not allowed to protect them at all, then it's a soft target guaranteed. So somebody who's willing to, some piece of shit's willing to go down that road, then he's able to do that without with minimal, if any, resistance. So that's why I'm not in favor of this bill. It's already illegal to kill people. It's already illegal to hurt people. We shouldn't make it illegal to defend ourselves. And the way it's sold to us as the general public, it's always one less way for a gun to get in. It's like, no, you're preventing law-abiding people, meaning somebody who would do it for the right reasons to, potentially defend us, for example. Because the criminals are already going to do what they want to do. They're already going down that road fully knowing that they're crossing a line. There may not be no coming back because they just whatever awoken in them, they're willing to do it. So don't fall into that hype. Another one, HF 4359, HF 4359, binary trigger. I guess that didn't get out of committee also, and that's where the school law is at too. It didn't pass committee. It has to pass committee before it can get voted on, before it has a chance of becoming a law. And if it doesn't get out of committee, then there's no chance of it becoming a law. Not that there's no chance of it ever becoming a law. It's just that as of right now. So usually they will table it, park it somewhere. And if there's still enough people that want it to happen, they'll bring it up again. And hopefully they'll have a better chance of passing it through. Just because it doesn't get through committee initially doesn't mean it won't come back. These things always resurface. So as of now, it's not going through. So that's where the binary trigger is also. As you remember, it was passed in the omnibus in 2024 or whatever it was. It was attached to the spending bill. And it was struck down in court as unconstitutional because of the way it was drafted into a larger bill, and basically is what they call pork, fat sometimes, where it was only passed because it was basically, well, we got to pass this bill. And then you sneak in some other stuff and it forces it through when it wasn't really voted on for that law. It just got tagged on. And so it got challenged in court and it got overridden. And so Minnesota isn't allowed to enforce it right now, the binary trigger. And in simple terms, the binary trigger bill is about using any type of device or mechanical modification to a firearm to make it fire faster, which is also arbitrary. What does faster mean? There's so much gray in this crap, and it's just to shove it through so it doesn't sound as intrusive, but I'll get into that, why it bothers me on that regard. You can always argue that you don't need to be able to shoot faster. Only reason you'd shoot faster is to cause harm to other people or whatever. I don't agree with that, but it's an argument that would be used for that. There are professional shooters that can shoot just about as fast with their finger. So don't buy into that hype. I mean, even the military doesn't even like to use full auto with firearms that the soldiers carry because they become less accurate and they waste a lot of ammo. It's not necessarily more effective at hurting other people, or, it's a way to waste a lot of ammo and maybe not use it for its intended purpose. So, and yeah, like I said, you can argue for it that device isn't really necessary, blah, blah, blah. I get that. So here's why I want you to change your mind on that. Because then they can use that to spin out into, or, to further widen the scope and then encompass semi-automatic firearms, which is, I think it's like over 80% of our firearms are semi-automatic, not automatic, semi-automatic. And that just means for every pull of the trigger, the gun will cycle. It'll eject a shell. It'll bring a new shell back in, and then you reset your finger and then you can fire again. So versus a gun that you manually cycle per shot, like say, let's just for visual terms, we'll say a shotgun where you pump a pump shotgun. That cycles each round through it. You fire, you cycle the old one out, you cycle the new one in, and you pull the trigger. Much slower, yes. Much slower than a semi-automatic. So if they get the binary trigger as a law saying a device that makes it go faster, then they can encompass more avenues that they can say are related. Now they can say Semi-automatic weapons are way too fast. That just makes them, you know, a device to harm people. That's the only reason why you would ever have to have your firearm, shoot that quickly, you know. Even though it's the most common firearm out there are semi-automatics of all variations, whether it be shotgun, rifle, pistol, semi-automatics are the most popular. They're much easier to use. They're not as, whatever. So that's my fear of the binary. Once you get your foot in the door, they just want to make the law bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's why you can't focus on the binary trigger part of it, where it's like, oh, it's just some useless toy, whatever you want to call it. You don't want them, once they got their foot in the door, they're going to make their way in. That's the problem. So it's best just to stomp this out. And the state is appealing the victory on the, where we got it overridden, or we got in our favor of getting it, you know, got it taken out because it was passed under that omnibus. But the state is still challenging that. And that's the other thing. You don't want it ever to become a law, because then it takes years to unravel it. And 99% of the time, that law is in place until it gets unraveled. So say this binary trigger law was passed and they just made it, everybody who has one now is a felon. Okay. Well, now you're a felon. The law may be overridden at some point, 2, 3, 4 years, but that whole time you're a felon. And 99% of the time you're not compensated for getting rid of it. So you can say, yeah, I want to protect my rights. I want to own this device. And if they're not going to give me for it, I'm just going to hold on to it. Okay. You are now putting yourself at risk for whatever penalty it is now for owning that, even if it gets overridden at some point and the law becomes unconstitutional. So now you're basically a felon waiting to happen, and that's not, I don't want to live that way. It scares the heck out of me, because they tried to do that with the SBR thing on the federal level. There's all sorts of stuff like that. And then when they, try to get protection for the people that it may impact, it's 99% of the time, it's only the people that are in the court case. And what helped us with the SBR thing, with the pistol brace, was that they let the members of the gun groups be protected if they were, and they allowed all the plaintiffs to be protected. So if you were a member of the gun group, and that's when the gun groups started to explode with membership, was, okay, I'm protected. I got a protection order as long as I'm a member of a gun group in the court case. So there's the benefit of also supporting these gun groups, as they're the ones that are fighting in court for you. So help them financially. It's expensive, and it's ultimately it's won in court, and it takes, thousands of hours, thousands of dollars. It's not cheap. And we're fighting somebody that has unlimited resources. At least it appears to be. So yeah, the binary trigger thing, you don't want that to happen either. The other thing, let's see. Ghost Gun, that failed committee also. HF 3407. And Ghost Gun is about serial numbers for firearms, making it illegal to have any firearm that doesn't have a serial number. Another BS Hollywood lore thing that gets more traction than it needs or deserves. Back in the old movie days, maybe they still do it in movies, I don't know. He had a firearm with no serial number, so that makes it, that's for sure means he was doing it, for, intended devious reasons or whatever. It's an illegally obtained gun that's not traceable. Well, firearms aren't traceable. That wasn't the intention of serial numbers. The serial numbers is for the manufacturer. It's to manage production numbers. It's to understand if they have a production problem, where it happened in the production line. It's for bookwork. We're not supposed to be tracking guns, and they're not licensed or titled. So you don't have like a title, like you do for an automobile that goes with each firearm. And that's probably what they would like ultimately, because then they could always, if they ever get to the point where they can take them back, then they know who owns everything and they can go knock on your door and retrieve it. And that's why they don't like the idea of ghost guns. And if you ghost gun is a gun you manufacture yourself. So if you manufacture a firearm yourself, assemble it, whatever, and it doesn't have a serial number, that's legal in the United States. You're allowed to create your own firearms as long as its sole purpose is for you. If you sell them, that's different. But it's part of the Second Amendment, being allowed to protect yourself. So, and then there's also, they weren't, serial numbers didn't become a standard till, what was it, like 1963? So not everything before 1963, something like that. I don't remember. Don't quote me on fine details on this stuff. This is mostly shooting from the hip with my best knowledge that I can remember. So, like I said, I'm not a lawyer, but so yeah. So yeah. So the downside of this is more of the big government thing. They want to be able to trace every firearm there is. So, because ultimately, I think they would like to have every firearm traced. And then at some point, they want to be able to outlaw them, and then they want to be able to retrieve them. That's getting your foot in the door, and they're trying to make their way in. That's the easiest analogy to think of. Eventually, they want to be in your home, and they just want to take them away. So don't let them get their foot in the door. This is not worth it. Like I said, if you got to fight this in court, it takes years. I mean, and the most obvious, the most obvious example of this, and Minnesota Gun Caucus owners use it in their latest video, was, you know how they just changed the ability for 18 to 20-year-olds to be allowed to buy firearms and get a carry permit. Um, he said that took them 4 years to do that. And that was a pretty obvious reason why it shouldn't be illegal for an 18 to 20-year-old. And if you're not familiar, the reason basically is, so why is it 21 for firearms? And so people keep minimalizing the Second Amendment like it's a secondary right. All rights are of equal value. There is no rights that are lesser or greater than another. And how important the Second Amendment is, it's number 2, right behind free speech. So don't ever let people minimalize gun ownership. It's for our protection, to protect ourselves. But anyways, where was I going with that? Mother trucker, dirty. Where was I going to go with that? So, yeah, I'm losing it, man. But yeah, so you got to be able to own firearms, whether you need to be able to track them. That's for their benefit, not yours. It's not going to stop crime to put a serial number on it. It's just going to make it a way for them at some point to just go confiscate them if they ever get to that point. If you have a registration, who owns them. And you can even do stuff nefarious with those lists behind the scenes with, big government insider stuff that we all don't want to believe is true, but we starting to see signs that it does exist on some level, where there's a government within the government, which we never want to happen. So that's got to get stopped. The other one of significance that's related, semi-related, is SF2320. It's again SF2320, and it's about preemption. And that is the hearing is today about that. And how is that related to guns, gun law, and all that stuff? Preemption is allowing cities to make laws independent of state law. So, like, I believe it was the city of St. Paul did an assault weapons ban just recently, within the last year. Certain firearms are not to be owned in the city of St. Paul, which they can't do that. At least they can't enforce it. They can make a law. So that's the other screwy thing. You can make a law, they can't enforce it. So why do they do that? They did it when they know they could pass it. I mean, there would be nobody to keep it from passing. And then it's preemptive in hopes that something like this preemption law or a change to preemption can be implemented, which means that, okay, now we give the individual communities, cities, whatever, the right, the power to make other laws, even if it's against state law. So now you can have government, politically party motivated controlled groups that are heavily planted in certain districts, cities, whatever, just start making these real these really strict, crappy gun laws because they have enough people to pass it, like this assault weapon ban in the city of St. Paul. City of St. Paul can say, "Yep, you're no longer allowed to own an AR-15, for example." And I don't remember exactly what the details are, but let's just say your only option is to surrender it to law enforcement, sell it to somebody outside of the community, or remove it from the. Either way, it's got to remove in the community if you live in it. You can't possess it or own it inside St. Paul. Which you think about the other, the flip side to that is, so say you're driving and you're transferring a firearm, you're driving with a firearm with you, and you drive through St. Paul and you have that firearm with you. Maybe that's a felony now. Now you got a felony because you're legal to own this in the state of Minnesota where you reside, but you drove through St. Paul with transporting it, and now you're charged with a felony. That's how dangerous this gets. That's the slippery slope. That's why we can't allow this preemption stuff to go away. It's gotta have overall governing body to maintain consistency across the state. Otherwise, you might as well have individual states, so at least you know where the borders are and who's in control of what. That's the reason why the state needs to be the one that overrides this crap. But they're trying to sidestep it so they can get a bigger foothold on basically getting rid of guns in the state. So pay attention to that one. It's like I said, that's SF2320. They're in committee today. Hopefully it doesn't move forward and that gets stalled also like these other ones. So yeah, pay attention to this stuff. It's happening. There's a lot of Democrats in elected positions in Minnesota currently, so they will keep trying to push this stuff through. And don't use that, don't expect that little false hope. Well, if it does pass, we'll just fight it in court. It's easy to say when you're not the one fighting it. That's not the way to deal with this. We need to deal with it early. Support Minnesota Gun Caucus owners. They're the ones that are doing the most locally. If you're willing to give money to them, great. I'm not sponsored by them. I'm not connected them with any way. So this is just me giving a shout out to somebody I believe in that thinks it's doing the right thing and doing the good for us in Minnesota here. So yeah. Anyways, you like this kind of content, give me a thumbs up. If you're willing, please subscribe. That's what helps us out the most. And if you subscribed already, if you could continue to support us by the like, comment, or sharing. So I guess we'll cut her off there, folks. Have a great day. Stay safe and God bless.